not involved in the crisis of his time, of him it can be said he never truly lived.
Our similarities are such that my traumas may have come from before combat, but their traumas are so close to the same. It may have nothing to do with combat. It's trauma in general, right? So it's just being human again, and looking back on that and saying, we don't need all these labels. It doesn't matter that you were a soldier. It doesn't matter what you did. It was, you have these traumas, and you're a human. And we need to talk. Have you ever faced a moment where everything you had worked for, your dreams, your purpose, came down to a single decision? Well, that was the reality for John Frankman. A former Special Forces team leader was now facing a decision: take the shot or lose the career. For John, it was more than about a career. It was about his morals, his beliefs. Let's jump in and hear his side of the story.
So what changed was the COVID vaccine mandate, and that being put out there in January of 2021. So basically, took a team in August of 2020, and when the COVID shot was rolling out, it was the initial pressure when the shot was available that kind of was the obstacle for me. I took the team, shot comes out, and we're told it's a readiness issue. And you know how a lot of officers are, where, this is the priority, stomp, this is the thing you have to do. They made that the only metric of success. When Afghanistan was going away, when we were fighting over JSETs, just little short missions and trips for people who aren't in the military, that is what was the metric for success. So I saw in January of 2021, or maybe it was February, when the shot was first available, we had a sign up for volunteering to get the shot. And I looked at the list and I looked at the time slots. I was the only officer within my company who didn't sign up for that. So I knew already, in a place where you don't want to stand out like a sore thumb, I was already standing out. And for me, it was the aborted fetal cell piece that first alerted me that this is a problem. I knew that every shot that was available, whether it was Pfizer, whether it was Moderna or Johnson & Johnson, they all used aborted fetal cells in either the testing or the production. So I knew I couldn't get it, at least immediately, but I wasn't sure. I was still trying to struggle through it. And I was just trying to, starting off my team time, trying to be successful. And now I have this other thing that I'm having to deal with and navigate. How do I still be a good officer while I now have this kind of moral dilemma of what I'm going to do about the shot? So for me, at first, I knew that I'm not going to get it until it's mandatory because of the aborted fetal cell piece. And being a Catholic, having spent 4 years studying to become a Catholic priest, I understood this as what we call remote material cooperation. That means that it's not something that you necessarily want to do, but if the circumstances are grave enough, you can go ahead and do it. So I at least hold off, and I tell my team, and I actually reach out to legal assistance. I talked to that lawyer so many times because I had other incidents when we had a transgender major within the battalion, and I was asking her, when am I legally required to call this individual? So reach back out to her and ask, what's the deal with the shot? What are the requirements? And I just pass that information on to my team. And I tell them that as their senior rater, as the person who determines how their success or failure works within the military, I'm neither going to reward them or punish them based on what they want to do with regards to the shot, that I personally don't want to get it until it's at least mandatory, and we're just going to move forward. Because of that, because I must have been the only team leader that gave them that kind of freedom or that kind of a speech, gave them the actual policy, the majority of them never got the shot until the mandate came out. So we were the least vaccinated team in all of 7th Special Forces Group, potentially Olive Group. Maybe some of the Guard units had, less or something like that. And that was kind of the thing that I had to navigate as a leader for myself and on behalf of my men. And it looked like a lot of kind of pressure, coercion, especially within the company level. The company sergeant major would regularly harass my team sergeant. He would go into the the company room, and he would be pulled into the sergeant major's office like 2-3 times a week for like an hour at a time. And he would just bother him about, why isn't your team vaccinated? What's going on? We were regularly referred to as the tinfoil hat team. And there was actually an incident where C-37, the CRIF, they were supposed to go on a VPOTUS mission, and a lot of the people there, they didn't get the shot. So they were looking at, well, what are we going to do? Maybe we can fill in my team 7324 for that mission. So I go into the company, I talk to the company ops sergeant, and he's like, hey man, I know a lot of your guys aren't vaccinated. If you get it, you could probably go and maybe have a VPOTUS mission. And I didn't want to try to play my hands immediately. This was maybe March timeframe, March of February of 21. And I just bring up like, well, you know, I don't think I can convince everybody to get it right away. And then I'm told, hey, you should probably find ways of coercing them. Tell them that you'll get them off the team if that's the case. And at that point, Sergeant Major yells from his office like, hey, sir, you're screwing up. You're screwing up your career. And I have an hour and a half long conversation. Like a good officer, I write everything down in a good memorandum for record style afterwards. But I'm just told I'm screwing up my career. I should look for something to do outside of the military. I've ruined my reputation. That if we lose a mission because we don't get the shot, that he's going to kick guys out of the company. He's going to put people on the B team. He's going to send them to SWCC, to the schoolhouse where they can be teachers. That's not a threat, that it's a promise. And I keep telling him just what the legal thing is that you can't give me undue command pressure and coercion. And you can either punish or reward based on this. It's not mandatory right now. There's no FDA approved shot. It's not mandatory. You can't make us do that. So I'm basically in a serious situation with my company leadership moving on, you know, and that's kind of how a lot of my team felt. And I saw the guys getting stressed out. I saw my team start getting stressed out. I'm stressing out because my guys are stressing out. I'm just trying to take care of them. So that was the situation I found myself in until kind of even more circumstances continued to happen.
Okay, so in your position as the team leader, all the guys are looking to you, right? They want to know what decision you're going to make. You're the commander of the team, which means you've got 11 families, 11 men, but men with families, their futures. You've got all this on your shoulders, and the command is pressuring you to make that call and say, hey, no, you guys need to go do this, because the command knows the team will listen to you, but you're trying to give the guys the option, and now that's looking frowned upon. So how is this going to affect your career, right? Like how does that work going from a team? What's your next position up?
Yeah, I mean, it totally hurt the career, and I had probably gotten to the point. So spring of 2021, I was actually accepted to be a teacher at West Point. So I applied to the philosophy department, and I was accepted to get a master's degree in philosophy and to teach philosophy and what I think is ironic, ethics at West Point. But that would require me to be vaccinated, that as would come up later on. So for me, with that schooling, I would do 2 years of school. I would then teach for 3 years. And because of the ADSO, the additional duty service obligation of school, that would have been 6 years, total of 8 more years, at which point you just do career. So I'm now planning on career, trying to just get a good enough evaluation from leadership to kind of move forward. But I mean, what ended up happening, and actually you mentioned the guys' families, that was their concern. That's why they didn't want to get the shot. We knew, and anyone who had their eyes open and was looking at any kind of alternative media outlets knew that there was harms with these shots. We heard about the heart issues for young men. We heard that natural immunity worked better. Many of us had already had COVID. We were spreading memes to each other. I mean, it was just a great team environment where we just laughed and spoke pretty openly. I mean, just I felt more like equals with the guys to a lot of extent. Obviously still the leader, but just listening to their perspectives, hearing what they had to say. But for them, their concern is what happens when I get screwed up from the shot. If I get screwed up from it, how am I going to take care of my family? There's no liability right now. This is a voluntary thing. I've talked to legal assistants enough, and I had people outside of the team, outside of my unit, who are contacting me from the 82nd or buddies in the Coast Guard, and they're just trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm just trying to provide all the resources that I can, talking to different lawyers. And I am hiring a lawyer too, just to try to figure out and how to navigate it. But at any rate, because of the guys is one of the reasons why I tried to protect them, so that they would have the liability should they get screwed up from the shot. But What ended up happening is that was just the start of it, the kind of January 2021. And what I would want the listener to know is that the pressure that happened before the mandate came out was the worst for me. I mean, from that, we had people signing up. So already as an officer, you're looking different. We were supposed to go on a JSAT to a country that did not require the shot at all. And we were going to go there in August of 2021. Now, I went to the pre-deployment site survey. I went there for 5 days beforehand in April. It was great. Got to meet the partner force. We were excited to go work with them. And I was on a military freefall team, so we have the assets laid on to actually make the mission work. But then in June of 2021, which a huge low point for me, we're at Archangel. We're doing military freefall jumps. It's 2 weeks long. We find ourselves in the second week, which is night jump. So we're jumping from 14,000 feet with oxygen and equipment and nods. And with that kind of low speed aircraft, I mean, I'll just admit it. I didn't have the cleanest exits sometimes. I had to get back in my stomach a couple times, just not having that best exit. So I'm just stressed out about that. We're doing 2 jumps a night, 3 jumps a day. And people don't understand the adrenaline dump that comes from that. I mean, because you're on a free fall team, but stressed enough about that. Then we find out that there's a first Special Forces Command policy that you need the shot in order to deploy. Because the military couldn't get the mandate to come soon enough, and because military leaders are being evaluated based solely on how vaccinated their teams are, their battalions, units are, they're coming up with whatever command policies they can in order to push people to get this shot, which they don't want against their will. So first Special Forces Command makes it a policy you need the shot in order to deploy. I talked to the team, I talked to the team sergeant, asked people what they want to do, and explained to them that I personally am not going to get it until the mandates comes in. So we all decided we're not going to get it. So I talked to my company commander, I give him a call, and he's like, hey, John, I know you and your team don't want to get the shot, but what's it going to be? Are you going to get the shot, or are you going to lose this mission? I said, well, sir, we're going to have to give up the mission because only one of my men wants to get the shot. He's like, oh, okay. I think he was pretty surprised by that. I think most people thought that when push came to shove, that's where we were going to cave or fold.
Get backed into a corner and
right.
And you're going to cave.
But I did say, well, that is unless you're willing to accept natural immunity, because at that point I'd gone to LabCorp, other men had gone to LabCorp. A lot of us knew we already had COVID, already had the antibodies, which should be enough of a security thing. But I was told, no, they're not willing to accept the risk. But that really struck me. They weren't willing to accept the risk. While we were out in the middle of Arizona doing military freefall jumps at nighttime with oxygen and equipment, and I'm not having the best exit. So that was just extremely, I don't know. And it was at that point, and like I said, I didn't know whether I was going to get the shot or not. At this point, I was thinking remote material cooperation. But I continued to pray. I continued to study, to discern, to read different theological works. And what came to my mind was that abortion is just so evil. And there was one article I read by Father Phil Wolf that explained that it's not just the murder of the unborn child, it's the continued theft of its body parts. And that there's this whole industry that's involved. And if we look at it, the human embryo kidney that's used is 293. What does that imply? That there were over 200 attempts to harvest a human kidney. That also implies that the human has to be at a certain developmental level in order to extract that kidney. So we are just in this mass genocide industry that is helping to make these shots. And I just came to a point where I'm trying to figure out what's a sin, what's not a sin, and then what's the most perfect thing I can do for God. And I thought, maybe I can justify getting this and say that theologically the Pope said it's okay. Maybe I can fake this and just use mental reservation. And if I ask about it, I'll say, oh, I got the shot if, someone squirted it in a trash can. But then I thought, the most perfect thing and the place where God gives me that peace, the Holy Spirit gives me the peace in my heart, is when I say, I'm not going to get the shot and I'm not going to lie about it. So that's the stance, that's the choice I knew. So when I came back from Archangel that June, that's when I knew I'm not going to get the shot no matter what. I'm going to put a religious exemption in, and we're just going to trust in God and see where it goes.
Okay, so at this point, you're not expecting it to go bad. You're expecting to get your religious exemption. Everything is going to be fine. This will all blow over. Your career's still going to continue to go, but you've already lost one trip. You mentioned the VPOTUS trip that you guys were potentially going to go on. So now you're losing trips. This religious exemption, is that going to keep you on par with all of your peers with the competitive nature of what you got going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, even just not getting the shot and taking it to the religious exemption level, even though I'm not supposed to be discriminated against because of that, depending on who leadership is, they can write your evaluation as being not as good as it maybe it should be, but say it's for something else. And I've had a number of people reach out to me, tell me that's what happened to them. They're like, they didn't say it was because of the shot, but it was a career-ending OER that I got. And the kind of consequences for not getting the shot began right then. Even though the mandate didn't come out until August of 2021, we went from losing that trip, we were put into an unwanted, a couple unwanted exercises. For one, we were put in a company evaluation where my team sergeant and I, we were concerned that it was actually a setup to get fired, because it was Eglin strike a couple of years before my buddy had, or a year before my friend had gone on it, and his company commander got fired during that exercise, and all the team leaders who did not have Ranger tabs had to go to Ranger school. So I thought, man, is it going to be an exercise like that? Well, fortunately, my team sergeant and I, well, just the team did amazing. It wasn't me, it was the team. They crushed it. The other team had some issues, so they could not use that as an excuse. And I don't actually think that was the intention, but it was in the back of my mind. I think leadership, they did want us to succeed there. But after that, we were sent to the Joint Readiness Training Center for anyone who hasn't, been there, that's like a 2-week exercise in the middle of the woods, super not fun. If you're soft, it sucks. I mean, you're, because you're supposed to be operating behind enemy lines, and we're trying to do unconventional warfare within a multi-dimensional, large-scale combat operation environment. So we are kind of out there in the deep. I mean, the first exercise, this is how much it sucked. Like, I had the ammonium sweats again, which is when you're burning so much energy that you don't have enough fat, you don't have enough carbs, you're burning your freaking muscle. So that's the kind of shit that we had, just even with that first kind of infill for that first mission. Then we're in the middle of the woods. And one of the orders that we had when we were there is that the unvaccinated service members are supposed to wear red wristbands and red tape on their gear to indicate their vaccine status. And the irony was not lost on anyone. I mean, the other team understood the irony, and just like guys give each other crap sometimes, that team gave us some crap, made us gold stars and things like that, because that's totally what it reminded us of. But my team sergeant and I, we made the decision that no, we're not going to do that. That's just stupid. But to have that as like a regular rule that's put across the Army, and for leaders to sign off and think it's okay, insane to me. But we're out there in the middle of the woods. We get to mid-row, which is the halfway point. You're just dead tired. You just want the 12-hour break that you can get. They sent the other company commander out. We were attached to another company. So that company commander came out and he counseled all of my service members who were not vaccinated, myself included. And we were told, because mandate came out August of 21, we're now in September of 21, which is when we're at the Joint Readiness Training Center, that you're either you're gonna get the shot, or within 3 days you're gonna be counseled. We're gonna have more negative paperwork against you. So that was probably the lowest point for me. And I'm just stressed out. I'm like, what the heck is going on, man? We're in the middle of the woods. Why are they coming at us right here? I'm just trying to be a successful team leader. I'm trying to protect my guys. I can't even protect them when they're out here. So I called my company commander. I asked him, sir, why are we getting counseled in the middle of the woods when we don't have the proper legal, religious, medical resources? You're expecting guys to make a lifelong career-wise decision without these resources. How am I supposed to show them that training to fight and win wars is more important than administrative bullshit when this is hanging over our heads and we're just not going to get training value right now? So I bring that up to the company commander, and he gets back to me in about 10, 20 minutes and says, okay, so we'll wait and have the counselings when you get back to base, when you get back to 7th group, which made me think that, well, if I was able to have that kind of conversation and push back, why didn't any of my leadership push back for me? Why wasn't anyone trying to protect the guys that were doing training? Why is it me, who's in the training environment, having to fight for the guys, fight for myself? I mean, if he had just told that to me, whatever, I had my exemption ready, written up, boom. But to put that kind of pressure on the dudes, it's just totally messed up. So, unfortunately, this part feels long because there's just a lot of just trash that happens to me, happens to the team after that mandate coming out, after the shots available. But like from there, we go back to 7th group. We have the series of counseling. So we go back on a Tuesday, everybody's counseled by the company commander. And what a lot of people don't understand is this order was illegal. And it was illegal because there was no FDA approved shot available. We were told that Comirnaty was FDA approved, but Pfizer was the only thing that was available. So just about everybody on the team, or a lot of the guys, would ask the company commander, hey, there's no FDA approved shot. How are you going to enforce this? How is this legal? And he just didn't know. Yet we were counseled anyway. The next day we bring that up to the doctors, and we bring up that you're not accepting your own medical policy, which is to provide medical exemptions for people who've already had COVID, who can prove they have immunity. At this point, I've had two immunization tests, or 2 tests for antibodies, and I've proved antibodies on both. But the doctors are just putting out lies, saying, oh, the shot's fine. And at this point, the vaccine adverse events reporting system is saying well over 10,000 deaths. I don't know how many it's at right now, but even back in the spring, it was like at like 5K something. So we see that there's deaths associated. We know there's side effects associated. We're bringing these concerns up to the doctors, to the medics. We're bringing up that it's illegal. We're bringing up that they're not accepting medical exemptions. I put my religious exemption in that Wednesday, that October Wednesday of 2021. Everyone else who didn't get the shot, by the end of the week, they were greeted with a battalion commander, the sergeant major, a chaplain, the lawyer, a medic, and basically they were either going to leave with a general officer memorandum for reprimand, or they were going to leave with a shot in their arm, and that was it. And they were willing to destroy guys' lives, destroy guys' careers over that. And yeah.
Wow. It's unbelievable. When you turned in your religious exemption, how was it received?
So it was received well, and that's where I got like a bit of relief after that. Like my leadership, they knew I was religious. I mean, there's most people, if they know me, they know I'm a Catholic, they know I'm a Christian. And chaplain, I went through the process with him. He's like, hey, we're going to do an interview. I'm sure it's going to go fine. So they were supportive of me for the exemption. Yet it was kind of big army policy, which is what hindered my career and pushed me out. If I could have, I was able to have enough rapport, and I don't blame my leadership totally, right? They were, maybe with regards to Stockholm syndrome, you can have some empathy for kind of your captors. I still think that they did much better than others. And I was hearing horror stories from people in other parts of the armed forces, other parts of the army. So they appreciated it. I put it in a very timely manner. Yet I never got an answer on it. And that's what killed it, because while my exemption was pending, I couldn't deploy. I couldn't go TDY and travel, and I couldn't PCS to future duty assignments. So, I mean, ultimately, my team time gets cut short, like 15 months instead of the 18 or 24 months I'm supposed to have. I mean, I pushed back on that too, because I'm like, hey, you're saying that the policy says I can't deploy, so you're taking me off the team, but the other policy says that I'm supposed to get 24 months. So it seems like you're just kind of picking and choosing which policy you want to follow.
Right.
Whatever favors you. So go to the 3 shops, sitting there, operations office for a good bit of time. And at this point, I'm supposed to PCS for grad school for West Point. And I talked to West Point. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Is there a way for me to, I don't know, be able to still teach or what? And yeah, I'm not allowed to PCS. So I had to give up on that dream, that opportunity.
Okay, so I want to take you back to the day you graduated the Q course, right? So you go through all of that training, you're the best of the best of the best, and you're graduating. You know you're going to 7th Special Forces Group. In your mind, where is your career going? What is going to be that end point? Are you going to be the general of the Army? Like what in your mind, where is this taking you? Where does God have you going on this?
I was honestly trying to figure that out, and I was just really happy to have made it in the Q course. You know, I mean, I wouldn't say I was ever like that top stud in anything. I was just very happy to graduate. Like I didn't suck by no means. I was a Green Beret, but I was just like, all right, I proved myself in the Q course. Now I have to prove myself here at 7th Special Forces Group. So there's a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of anxiety. You know, I had to kind of build my confidence. Like, how am I going to work with these dudes who've had so many deployments, so much experience, and like everyone around me in the Alpha course, just a bunch of studs and things like that. So I'm just excited to get down there, to get on a team. There's definitely some nervousness about it. Hadn't been to combat or anything like that before. So I just thought the world was just, at my disposal, but I got to work hard. I got to earn it every day. I mean, there's that story that you're only as good as your last as good as your last exercise. I still believe that to this day. Only now it's just like, interview or interaction with congressman, whatever kind of nonsense. But yeah.
Sure. Okay. No, and that makes perfect sense. So you've got, the world's your oyster. As far as group is concerned, there's so many different ways you can go. You end up on a free fall team, which is a lot of team leaders' goals, and you're that pinnacle. And now you have to deal with this. And this obviously wasn't expected. Nobody expected it. You had to deal with it, and now you're coming out the other side realizing that the career that you may have had in your mind is now gone. And now you have to pick up the pieces from that. So talk to me about how you were treated once you turn that in. Once your team time got cut short, you're being treated a different way. And where are you going?
Yeah, I mean, the worst treatment that I experienced was in between the vaccine being available and then the mandate coming out, because at that point, leadership is trying to coerce you. They're trying to use all the different tactics against you in order to get you to do something that they can't legally require you to do. So they're using whatever coercive methods, and it looked different. And, I had it a lot better than others. For me, it was just career repercussions, losing out on missions. For other people, I have a friend, she was put in quarantine like 140 days out of a course of 2 years. And that's like solitary. Yeah, no joke. Like, she's over in Belgium. They kept saying like, oh, contact tracing, sick, something like that. So like for 2 weeks at a time, over a course of 2 years, put in quarantine for like 140 days. Another buddy of mine who I was in seminary with, he's not allowed to get off of his boat. He's in the Coast Guard. He can't get off the boat and leave, even to go to mass, things of that nature. I knew in the 82nd, they had a sergeant major stand in front of the battalion and said, hey, if you had the shot, go over there. And mind you, again, before the mandate, go over there and you have the day off if you've already had the shot. If not, put your rucksack on. We're going for a long, grueling ruck march. They tried to shame dudes. Like for HKIA, for the evacuation, General Donahue, and I'll say his name, he went to every company. He went down to the company level and he talked to individual soldiers and asked them, did you get the shot? Why didn't you get the shot? If you don't get the shot, you can't deploy. If you can't deploy, you're not a leader. Are you going to leave your entire platoon behind? Are you going to leave your squad behind? I don't need you. So that kind of, from a 2-star now a 3-star, because, we're rewarding this kind of nonsense. So for me, the treatment was within my battalion. I love my leadership. I still respect them. I still text, one of my BCs and other officers, and I tried to maintain that good relationship. And part of doing that was continuing to work hard for them while in the operations office. And I kind of felt like there were some captains that were getting out that seemed saltier than me, even though they're the ones that their careers weren't being forced out. But the frustration for me, and so we kind of, in the story, we got to the point where I got the team time cut short, the West Point trip, or the West Point job was taken from me. I've now lost out on a lot. I'm just kind of waiting around to get kicked out, more or less. My exemption still hadn't been answered, and all the exemptions I've heard of are getting denied. So in August of 2022, a year after the mandate, we have General Roberson comes to 7th Group, and he has a town hall. So it's E6 and up. You have all the, sergeant majors, battalion commanders, group commanders there, and he's just taking questions. And a buddy of mine told me that on my tombstone it needs to say, if I don't say something, who will? So I just went with it, sent it, and especially like 20 minutes in, and he, there's a lull in questions. He's like, any gripes, any complaints, anyone else? Raised my hand. Hey, sir, Captain Frankman, AS3 over in 3rd Battalion. 2 weeks ago, the CDC said that there is no distinction in guidance in how the unvaccinated are supposed to be treated compared to the vaccinated. We have about 30 of us who have not received the shot, who cannot deploy, go TDY, or PCS to future duty assignments. Furthermore, I've had my exemption pending since last October. That said, is there any conversation about getting rid of the mandate? And when are we going to get our exemptions back? And he just remarks really quickly, have you heard of Novavax? So what they were trying to do, and this is just them following whatever company line that they're told. We were told Novavax didn't have aborted fetal cells. It definitely did. So I just respond right away, yes, sir, that uses aborted fetal cells. And he seemed flustered, and he's like, well, I'm not going to argue about that with you on that point. But if the Army tells you to do something, you should do it. We're trying to find a middle ground for you. And I don't want to kick anyone out of the military, but I will. And it was that point I'm like, you know what? Forget this, dude. I'm not waiting for my exemption to get denied so I can get kicked out with something other than an honorable discharge, which most people who were getting kicked out for refusing the shot did not get an honorable discharge. Another thing I'm trying to get fixed. So put my paperwork in, set to leave. As I'm getting ready to leave, I have to have a meeting with the 06. So have that meeting, and again, I go back to my tombstone. If I don't say something, who will? So I'm like, okay, let's try to use the platonic method as much as we can. Don't come too aggressive, just ask questions. So he asked, why are you leaving? Well, I go through everything that happened to my team, of team getting pressured, losing a mission, losing out on West Point, the armbands, all that jazz. And I ask, what would you do? He's like, okay, all right, makes sense. And then I ask him, do you think that this was a legal order? And he says yes. Then I asked, do you realize it requires an FDA-approved shot to be a legal order? And he answers that he's not a doctor. And I told him, well, I've talked to your doctors. They're a bunch of yes men and they're useless. So maybe I raised the temperature a little bit there. But then I asked, have you heard of Nuremberg Code? Because if we're looking at what happened in World War II, the Nuremberg violation is forcing and coercing someone to get a drug against their own volition. Any kind of coercion in that nature. Not knowing the side effects for it. So I asked him if he's heard of Nuremberg Code and if he's done anything to look into vaccine injuries. And he gets defensive at this point and asks, do you have anything other than the shot to say? And we're just going in conversation. He says too much ideology can be a bad thing. And he says, I'm going to a dark place. And I tell him, well, I'm not going to a dark place. I did what I think God wanted me to do. And then says, too much ideology is bad. Have you heard of the Crusades? And I told him, I think that's a little bit off topic, but I mean, if we're going to go there, Christianity was spread through the blood of the martyrs and Islam through the sword. And then just some other things that, it didn't hit me until later on, but he asked if I believed in selfless service. And I'm like, well, I think we need to define it at this point. But he's like, do you think your actions reflected selfless service? I'm like, yes, sir. I did what was the right thing. There's nothing more important going on than what I could have done, which is the right thing. And he asked me, what would I tell a Christian or Catholic who didn't get the shot? And I said, or who got the shot? And I said, well, I would ask them, do you think that it's worth that a shot that's involved in the sin of abortion, the theft of a baby's body parts, the murder of the unborn child, that is worth it for a disease you have a 99.99% chance of surviving? And if you're Catholic, I recommend you consider talking to a good priest and going to confession. That is kind of what I answered. And I don't know, that just left that meeting and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, that was kind of the last, I'm done with this place. This is absolutely ridiculous. So just kind of coasted through Skill Bridge and just got ready to get out. But other ththings that kind of hit me too is just going through an officer getting promoted from captain major and hearing him take the oath. Do you solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic? I was thinking about the Constitution. I was thinking about what other officers were doing, that they weren't taking this into consideration. We had a team building exercise with the new battalion commander, and we're going through our mission, going through what the battalion did or didn't do. And I want to ask, why do you think we're losing service members? People want to leave. How are our actions reflected during this? We just threw a bunch of dudes under the boat and just treated them like Jews in World War II time frame. So it was an incredible journey, a very frustrating one, which I don't know, but at any rate, ended up leaving the military 1st of July in 2023, and that's kind of where we ended up.
So since then, a lot of the stories have come out about people not wanting to get vaccinated, ending up getting out of the military, whether that's getting kicked out, getting a other than honorable discharge. You mentioned, what did you end up getting an honorable discharge with? I did,
yeah, because I was seen as voluntarily separating, so I put the paperwork in to leave in September of 2022, and then the mandate was rescinded in January of 2023. So my religious exemption was never answered. They were just sitting on it. And that's the Army's way of putting people's careers on ice. So those who want to progress can't move on, can't deploy.
So were you flagged essentially, or was it just very similar to being flagged because you're waiting on that exemption, therefore you can't have any favorable actions granted towards you?
I think it was flagged insofar as my medical record showed that I wasn't vaccinated, and it probably showed that I had a religious exemption pending. But when I left, I had an honorable discharge. I don't think that was reflected on my OER.
Okay.
Or PHC 14.
So in your opinion, I mean, you see where our numbers are at right now, right? Where we've been struggling to maintain what we have. We're losing more than we have coming in. Do you think this has any play in that?
I think this has more play in it than anything else, if I'm going to be honest. And I know that, and this is a frustrating thing because I try to share the readiness message with different members of Congress. I've been up to DC about 8 times since. The military kicked out 8,600 service members because of the shot. That is the small number. That's how many were kicked out. I don't count within that number. The total force, military strength, fell by 60,000 the first year after the shot came out. And I was talking to one lawyer, one person who works in a law office, and he thinks that potentially 100K left based on this. And you could see it. People just through word of mouth, people like, hey, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to medically retire. I'm not going to re-enlist. I'm going to retire early, even though I was going to go another 4 years or something of that nature. So I think this is a huge readiness issue. One, because of the numbers, the retention issue, but then with recruitment, lowest recruitment the last 3 years in modern history, just absolutely atrocious. And people are telling their buddies how they were treated during the COVID risk mitigation fiasco. And that is making a lot of people not want to get in because they don't know what they're going to have to do with their bodies. And we're seeing that this shot's not effective. And not only is it not effective, a lot of people are getting hurt by it.
Absolutely. Now, how would you say all of these mandates, how would you say they affected the team's mental health as a whole? I mean, you're a leader, you're coming into this new team who had deployed together, I think most of them, but now you're seeing all of this outside. And how's their mental health with all of this?
It's atrocious. It's the worst thing for the mental health. It's their stories to tell. I can't even get into all of their stories. If they want to come out and tell it, because there's some atrocious, terrible things that occurred for people within my team who did not want this thing, but it was bad. I mean, the numbers that died from actual COVID, I need to compare numbers that died from actual COVID to numbers that died from suicide, and then thinking that secluding guys, putting them in quarantine, especially that one girl for 140 days, but for guys on teams, taking their livelihood away, them going through 2 years of the Q course, a bunch of years of Afghanistan. There's one guy who stayed back, and he was the only one on his team who didn't get the shot, and he just couldn't believe that it doesn't matter how long you were in, what you've done before. If you don't get the shot, you are persona non grata. That's just kind of how you were treated. So I think it put, I've actually had to reflect on this a little bit after my more recent meeting with Trump. Like, I've just been going nonstop since trying to help fight this, that I haven't taken as much time to think, how did it affect me? What experience did I go through? Because it's definitely a story, but you just don't think about it a lot.
Right. Well, that's one of the things we talk about, right? When we join the military, we leave everything and everyone that we knew, and we join this new family, right? And this new family is supposed to take care of us, and we're trusting in that, and we're going to do everything that we're told, and we're going to move through. And you get to this new family where you're expected them to have your back. Not only do they not have your back within it, but they're not educated in what they're pushing on you, and now you feel torn. You left everybody and you're seeing this new group of people that they don't know what to expect with the world right now. The new world that they're in, they're calling this the new norm, and we've been deployed for the last 20 years, and now we're coming back to this, and our mental health for the majority of those older soldiers, that had gone through that, our mental health was in jeopardy. And now all this separation, because what we needed during that time where we judge our mental health and where we feel the most comfortable is when we're at work on the team, and now you're separating that. And I don't think enough studies have really been looked at with that. I mean, that destroyed dudes. I mean, like you said, you went through all of those things. You volunteered a multitude of times because you had a picture in your head of what you were going to be able to do for your country. And now you're fighting this fight over a shot that should have never even came into play.
And you know what also killed me is that this is how Special Forces Green Berets were reacting. And I remember in selection, I remember being so proud I was selected. I mean, it may be a theme, but like I was kind of surprised and like, wow, you know, I made it. Awesome. Like, let's just keep going. Let's just keep proving myself, because I wasn't sure. I just wanted to give it my best and see what happens. But we had IQ tests. We had psychological tests. We were observed during team week. We were told what we're doing is unconventional. It's kind of in that gray area. That doesn't mean that you do things immorally, but it means you do things unconventionally. You don't necessarily follow the rules exactly as they're written. You understand the task and the purpose, and you are expected as a grown adult to achieve the end. But when it came to the COVID shot, you know, for a group that's supposed to use psychological operations in overthrowing other governments, we weren't able to see what was happening with our own country. And I remember hearing like the group commander talking about what's going to happen in Colombia if they get a more, communist type of president in charge, how that's going to hurt our relationship. And I'm thinking like, hey man, are you thinking about how our current communist president is hurting our country? Like, how much reflection are you doing on that? But it definitely lowered kind of my ideal of the critical thinking capacity I thought a Green Beret would have, and especially leaders would have.
No, that you hit the nail on the head. It's literally, this is what we do for a living, and when it's happening right here in our backyard and we're not able to recognize it, maybe sometimes we're a little too close to the problem. But you saw it as a problem, and then you made the decision to change it.
Yeah.
How are we changing it?
So when I was on the team, when I was in Special Forces, I was concerned about myself. I was concerned about my men. And I would have been way behind the ball in order to make any kind of major change within the group. Like, knowing what I know now, could I have tried to get together with other team leaders, band together, get a network going? Potentially. But the way the teams are designed, going into the back of the battalion in order to get to the team room, leaving through that, only interacting with the company just enough to interact to make it sure you don't have like a terrible OER. It would be a lot harder for Green Berets to band together versus like SEALs who might be a little bit more, close or something like that, or work more together. The other thing too is that, I mean, we all know a lot of people fake the shot, and medics could be willing to help out or something like that. People are creative; they're able to find a way. So that's the other thing with kind of the gray being the kind of motto, working within the gray. A lot of guys take that to be, you can do something immoral. I knew I could have been able to figure that out, but I just knew that wasn't the right thing to do. I think that would have been a sin of scandal. Scandal being what leads others to sin, what leads lesser people to sin. And if I, as a Christian, think that this is wrong, I can't then have other people think, John is a Christian, he got the shot, therefore it's okay to get the shot. So.
Okay, so what are your thoughts moving forward?
So what are we doing?
How would you prevent this from coming a thing again?
Right. So yeah, since getting out of the military, I've been trying to work with members of Congress. So I got out, and I kind of found myself figuring out, like, what am I going to do, God? What do you want with my life? I thought I was going to do this career in the military. I ended up going on an 8-day silent retreat in Lincoln, Nebraska. And it's called an Ignatian retreat. You're like praying 5 holy hours a day. And in each holy hour, you're reflecting on something different. You might be reflecting on like the birth of Christ, his resurrection. You might be reflecting on just the first principle and foundation, which is that man was made to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by this means to save his soul. And I was going there because I was trying to find meaning and direction in life. What do you want me to do, God? At that point, I had drafted an article in my op-ed, but I was kind of questioning, do you want me to think about the priesthood again? Because I was in seminary before, where are we at? And it was kind of through that prayer that I didn't quite get the answer, but then very providentially on St. Ignatius feast day, the same style of retreat I had been on just a week or two before, my first op-ed got published and was able to speak out on this issue. So since getting out in July of 2023, I've probably done over 50 interviews, written a few op-eds, and been up to Congress multiple times, trying to work with congressmen to repair the damage and hold leaders accountable. So I think there needs to be three things. There needs to be awareness on what happened in the military. There needs to be accountability for those leaders that violated the law, and there needs to be various legislative steps to repair the damage that was done. Yeah.
So that's a large order, right?
It's huge.
That's huge. We're talking about retroactively punishing people, retroactively making things right. So paying people for what do you think the numbers would be that got out that would receive either brought back into the military? What was it? Did I hear Trump said something along the lines of he wanted to basically reinstate all of those soldiers that got removed, right? Do you have any idea what those numbers would be?
Talking to most people, because of how terribly they were treated, they don't want to come back. And that's the tough thing. So they've moved on with their lives. The ones that were able to mentally, emotionally process this have found work. They've gotten busy. Others that are hanging on are probably so salty that they might not want to come back in. So I would think maybe you get 20% back, maybe 30% back. But getting those buyers back, there needs to be some incentive. So the way this kind of worked for me, and I can't believe I found myself in this, and this is where I just really believe it's God-oriented, that I'm just a very imperfect instrument trying to open myself up to his will just through going on this retreat, seeking his will, and then him just really blessing me with success, meeting the right people as I go up to DC, as I go to different events. So I started by just kind of going door to door, trying to talk to congressmen, trying to talk to their staffs, explain what happened, explain different steps. One avenue I was trying to push was the National Defense Authorization Act being a way to put legislation in. So the repairing piece, I think that needs to include the back pay. It needs to include some kind of a board process in order to assess what opportunities were lost for each individual, whether that's career progression, school, award, things of that nature. So for instance, for me, let's say I was going to go back. Am I still a year group 14 guy? Do I then get to go to grad school? Do I get to choose my year group and go to a year group that's suitable? Or do I want to stay on path with my peers and have that kind of promotion? So these are all things that I just worry that most congressmen, most people who would be in maybe the next administration's Defense Department might not understand this kind of nuance, because there's not the awareness. And for the awareness, I've been begging, trying to talk to members of Congress, especially the House Armed Service Committee, to have a series of hearings on this issue to talk about the legality of the mandate, because it was illegal. The religious exemption piece, because they were blatantly violated and all of them denied. The medical exemption piece, which was just ignored, and the medical injuries. Because I know, I was just on the phone with a friend on the way over here, and she's 24. After she got her shot, she's had 3 heart attacks, has a pacemaker, multiple strokes, things of that nature. Another buddy I know, he is now paralyzed. He has Guillain-Barré syndrome after getting a couple of the shots. Somebody else I met here at a political event, he has tremors in his hands. He has pins and needles from his lower back down to his feet. It affects his mobility. He was a pitcher in college baseball. I mean, these people's lives are changed.
No, and I was going to ask that question, right? What about the people that did get the shot, right? And there's obviously effects of that vaccine, right? I mean, I think we've all watched it during the recent debates, right? That's not the same guy that stood up there, 4 years ago. And I think that has probably a lot to do with the vaccines. I mean, he was pumped full of them. And so the deterioration of the mind as well. I mean, I've heard stories of that. So how do you go back retroactively to people that have been infected by the shot? I mean, what are we going to do for them?
That's a good question for doctors, for sure. I mean, what should happen, and one idea is the VA. They have the PACT Act, which covers toxic exposures. So how everybody's getting assessed for burn pits. You've been around them. Well, now we know that burn pits were negatively affecting the VA. Affecting veterans. and now they're getting coverage for it. Well, the COVID shot needs to be added under and covered in the PACT Act. That is just the most quick, simple solution that you can have, where we're actually looking for some kind of linkage, because, I've looked at people's paperwork and it might say COVID shot 0% or something like that. And so it's not necessarily acknowledging that linkage between the damage that they have and the injuries that they currently are living with. So that's the thing. There could be, taking it even further. And so we're all military people. We understand lines of effort. This is my line of effort, right? And this is just a small symptom of a much larger problem that's happening within the whole country. I think the military, they dealt with the COVID shot mandate and COVID risk mitigation policies in a much more atrocious way than the rest of the country. It is just so impossible or very difficult for them to totally envision how terribly treated service members were because of this. But that's a bigger picture of these larger groups that are trying to gain power, and of just infringement upon personal liberties, of an understanding that it's not about the individual, that it's no longer a country that is for the people, by the people, of the people, but rather it is for whatever these kind of elites that are controlling different realms, whether it's pharma or tech, or kind of lobbyists that are trying to steer the direction that the government's going to go in, whether it's these federal agencies that are very closely linked to these lobbyists who are making laws. They're legislating even though we never voted for them. They're just career kind of politicians, but career people working in these agencies. So trying to fix all that. Another thing that would assist it is getting rid of, Ronald Reagan was great, but the Childhood Vaccine Safety Act made it where people cannot sue drug manufacturers for adverse events. We need to get rid of that. We need to make it so drugs, if you get hurt by it, a person should be able to sue for it. And if that's the case, that's going to be great. But I think the RFK has a number of amazing ideas. We just really need to hope and pray that Trump gets elected. Like, that's really, and that he then listens to RFK, and that he then listens to not necessarily me, but just service members who are negatively affected. They need to be brought into the picture to help discuss the ways to repair the military, to repair the damage that was done.
Okay, so last question, and it plays into what you were just saying. 9/11 brought us all together as a country. That was really the last thing that brought us all together. Is it going to take another 9/11? What are we missing to bring us all back together as a country where we really do care about each other, and we are that country that everybody has heard about?
Yeah, that is such a good question, and I don't know if I necessarily know the answer. We can look at what the problem is and try to think about different solutions, but there's just a totally different worldview right now. And Republicans aren't perfect, the right isn't perfect, but it does seem more and more like a battle between good and evil, where on this evil side, their main issue right now that they're trying to run on is just freedom for abortion, and they're wanting to transition children. And they think that the government should be able to control how you live your life, what you do with your children, and they're about control and safety, quote unquote safety over your own personal freedom. But on this other side, we have this understanding that our personal liberties, the gifts God gave us, is what matters. That the government is to serve the collective of the group of individuals coming together. That it's for the people. So there needs to be a changing of hearts and minds. That this can't just be a political renewal. There needs to be a spiritual and political renewal. And Christians are going to have to radically live their lives in different ways to change the culture, starting with themselves, starting with their families, shaping the communities. I don't think that the Benedict option of just going off and living in the woods is acceptable. You need to try to be there, and you need to try to immerse yourself and change the culture. And, I can't believe what God has been able to do with me over the last year and a half of just trying to be open. And if we all have that kind of openness, I got out, was able to do these interviews. I was invited by Representative Matt Gaetz to be his guest at the State of the Union, to be able to speak on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of service members negatively impacted by it, and then just be able to talk to Trump. That was that was such an event. But we just need everyone to just radically live for God, to radically try to conform their lives to Him. And you can do it in the small things, and you continue to have that growth mindset to take that ground slowly, and you'll continue to expand your influence. But it needs to be a cultural change. We need leaders to step up, and I think you understand what that position is depending on your relation with God as you talk to him, as you continue to explore. And there's going to be some trial and error. Like you might be like, well, should I be running for office? Should I be on the school board? And maybe you get destroyed at the election. Okay, maybe that's not it. But then maybe you volunteer at your church. I don't know. Just giving some examples. So just a lot of initiative, a lot of love for God, and just trust in him. And we might not be able to get it back. That's the other truth too, and that's okay. God is in control, and maybe it's necessary for this glory of God and salvation of souls that the country doesn't get repaired. But we need to fight. We're called to be faithful, not to be successful. And that's been the whole thing for me, is I'm just going to be faithful to the greatest extent I can.
Amen, brother. John, that was awesome, man. I really like how we close that out. I think that's a good call to action for all of our listeners, man. Just ultimately, trying to be better people, and just like you said, you don't have to be successful, right? Just keep working at it, and let's come back together as a country, and see what we can do.
No, I mean, you got to vote though, so please get out and vote for Trump. I think the world will just be, I'm really hoping and praying. We'll see.
I think the easiest way, and this is a question that I ask, is really just this. Like when we were soldiers, right? We fought under whatever administration was in charge. We cast our vote. Whoever won, they won, and we go to work. That's boss, right? And that's just the way it was. But I just ask you, like when we were deployed, and I looked at the equipment, the number of people I had under one administration compared to the other, right? In a lot of cases, we're being asked to do more with less numbers, less equipment. And so I ask anybody out there, I mean, just ask yourself, which administration did you do better under, right? I mean, how were you personally affected? Not what you heard, but how you're personally affected by who's in charge, and then go off of that, right? I mean, it's so hard to try to wrap your head around the news and the media and the spin that's out there right now. It's just really just ask yourself, how did you and your family do better? Was it under one or the other?
No, that's a great way to put it, and I mean, I think we all have met, and I've met a lot of like Green Berets and operators who they don't vote. They've never voted. But I'll tell you what, man, if we had a different president right now, I'd have a job still. Like I'd still have this job. I don't know. And you can change that, and you're allowed to change that. You're not being like partisan by doing that. You're just participating in the process that you are willing to die for. And you should have, Starship Trooper, more of a vote than another person. You earned that. So take advantage.
That's right. Well, John, thanks again for coming on Team Trek Podcast. We look forward to catching up with you in the future, seeing what's next for you. So anytime you want to come back, man, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ryan. This was great. Really appreciate chatting with you.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. God bless, brother.
God bless.